My dog Mushu is on a mission to expand our local animal shelter and to increase funding for that shelter. But he's a little worried. He's been hearing a whole bunch about how people are just apathetic about politics. They don't care anymore. They don't care about who their elected representatives are. And so he's just concerned no one is going to be motivated to do anything to expand that shelter. And so I sat Mushu down and said, Mushu, there's actually 3 different ways you can think about political apathy. And we probably should take some time to address each one as you engage your quest to expand the local animal shelter. The first perspective is the individualistic perspective. Now, this perspective focuses on people and people's qualities or characters as explanations for why people are engaged in politics or apathetic towards politics. And so from this perspective, you would say something to the effect of, right, people just don't care about politics. That's why they're not engaged. Maybe you hear people say people just don't know enough to get engaged, or if they were more knowledgeable about the topics, they would find a motivation to stay engaged. The general idea from this perspective is that, right, people just don't care. They don't care about who their elected officials are, and that is that perspective. And so for Mushu, right, this might be very kind of a daunting or difficult thing to process, right? Mushu cares so much about getting an expansion for this animal shelter, it's hard for him to fathom that people just don't care. But if this is your perspective, right, the emphasis for you should be to figure out ways to motivate people, to get people to care about the political issue that you are discussing. The second perspective is the structural perspective. Now, the structural perspective emphasizes barriers to participation. It is focused less on the individual and more focused on, right, how do policies and practices that are put in place make it harder for people to participate when they want to participate. So I'll give a few examples of that. The first, imagine that there was an issue that a city council was about to decide, and a bunch of people are actually invested in it. They want to go and share their thoughts with the city council. But the city council decides that they're going to put their meeting at 10 a.m. And so a bunch of people can't go because they have to work and are not able to get off of work. That doesn't mean that they aren't invested and interested and care about the issue. It just means that there's been a barrier in place at the time of the meeting that prevents them from being there. Another example of that is when there are meetings that are in places that are inaccessible. For example, if I were to hold a meeting in my apartment's on the 2nd floor, and there is no elevator to get up here. And so if I were to hold a political meeting here, it would be inaccessible for people that might really, really care and want to be involved in the issue, but aren't able to do so. Another example that this perspective might focus on is just long voting lines, right? If there are voting lines that are hours long, right, people who do want to vote might not just decide to vote because they don't want to wait in that line or they're not able to wait in that line. They're still interested in voting. They have ideas about who the best leaders would be, but they have just been, right, there's been a barrier in their place that prevents them from voting. A final example of that is gerrymandering. Gerrymandering, right, the ways that districts are drawn, the ways in particular that certain politicians have drawn districts in ways that benefit the incumbents, make it much less likely for people to want to vote or think that their vote matters, right? That they, right, if they've been gerrymandered into a district that is supposed to go one way no matter what happens, it might make them feel that their vote matters less, and thus, even though they might be interested in who they want to have as their political leader, they, right, feel that they are not able to do so or don't have as much of a voice or say in it because of the way the maps have been drawn. So that's the structural perspective. Now, the third perspective is the interactional perspective. This perspective focuses on our communication about politics and whether or not that communication is encouraging or discouraging involvement in the process. For example, if you are constantly hearing negative attacks over and over again, all you are thinking about is the negativity and the toxicity involved in the political process, and that is all you hear, that discourages you from wanting to get involved, right? If you have an issue that you are really passionate about, getting a new animal shelter in your community, but you're constantly berated with attacks, you might be concerned, right, that you should not speak up because you are concerned about getting attacked for your beliefs. And so that attacking and that all that use of that ad hominem is discouraging people from getting involved, according to this perspective. Another way we might have the interactional perspective play out is when we are just kind of talking about our political efficacy, right? Do our actions actually matter, and can they change the course of our communities, our state, our city, or our country? If we are constantly telling ourselves that our vote doesn't matter or our actions don't matter, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where, right, we convince ourselves not to get involved, and when more and more people are convincing themselves not to get involved, then there is actually less power that the people have when they are involved. I want to give a quick counterexample to that and a shout out to the people of Michigan, right? The people of Michigan, right, encouraged themselves in a way that got them involved in the process, and so they were able to create or get a ballot initiative to change the way that districts are redrawn in Michigan. And so that shows that, right, when people do persuade themselves that their efforts matter, they can get involved and can make some changes. We also can, right, encourage ourselves to get involved, right? The messages that we say in terms of, right, every vote counts, go out and vote, all of those messages might actually encourage us to participate. And so in the interactional perspective, we are looking at the messages that we have around politics and whether or not those encourage us or discourage us from getting involved. And beyond voting, there are so many ways for you to get engaged in your communities and to participate in the political process and political discussion of our nation, right? If you are in a community that has been ravaged by the opioid epidemic, right, getting yourself training and promoting training in Narcan can be an example that you can be involved in the political discussion and political conversation. You can write letters to the editor. You can support homeless shelters in the area or other shelters in your area, providing them financial means to assist people in your community and advocating for them. There are many ways for you to get involved in our political conversations, and so I encourage you to do so, to think through, right, what are some of the interactional and structural barriers that you are facing, trying to figure out ways to navigate them, to get involved and impact your communities, your cities, the state, the nation, the world. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a little bit more about how to conceptualize political apathy. In the comments below, please jot out some of your ideas about why people might be apathetic about politics and how we can get engaged in informing the conversations in our communities. If you haven't already, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'll see you next time.